Chicago's May usually brings the fresh breezes of spring, but on this day in 2025, the city was greeted by unusually cool temperatures and gray skies. Temperatures ranged from 12 to 19 degrees Celsius, with occasional showers soaking the streets. Taylor Swift was waiting at the bus stop to return to her hotel in the city, where she had come for a benefit concert. The air was cool, the sky overcast. People hurried past her. On the corner of the bus stop sat a boy in an old coat, his head lost in his hoodie. He was holding a worn notebook. Taylor noticed that the boy was drawing diligently. Curiosity got the better of him, and he approached him. "Hello?" he said in a gentle and pleasant voice. The boy looked up, his eyes searching Taylor's. "What are you drawing?" The boy hesitated, then handed the notebook to Taylor. On the page, there was a figure of a superhero. There was an angelic woman with long hair and a cape. Taylor recognized himself in the drawing. "Is that me?" he asked with a smile. The boy nodded. "Yes, I saw you on TV. You look so strong and beautiful." Taylor studied the drawing carefully. "You're very talented. What's your name?" "Jalen," the boy said. "Jalen, can I ask you a favor?" Taylor asked. "Can you draw me again? But this time, draw me through your eyes." Jalen was surprised. "Really?" "Yeah, I would like to see your point of view." Jalen nodded in agreement. "Okay." Taylor pulled a card out of his pocket. "This is my assistant's number. Contact her when you're done drawing. I'd like to see you again." Jalen took the card, nodded. Taylor smiled at him one last time and got on the bus, coming to the stop. As the bus drove away, Jalen opened a new page in his notebook. He picked up his pen and began to think. For the first time in his life, someone had recognized his talent. Jalen carefully placed the card Taylor had given him in the inside pocket of his jacket. Nothing was ever quite the same after that day. The city was the same, gray, tiring, sometimes merciless. But somewhere in Jalen's mind, a small glimmer of hope was lit. When someone like Taylor Swift told him to draw me from your point of view, it was as if she pulled out the self-confidence that had been trapped in his body since childhood. When he returned home, his mother was in the kitchen washing dishes. Her tired face bore the scars of long shifts. In the corner of the kitchen, his 3-year-old brother Emiliano was playing with his toy truck on the floor, while his 10-year-old sister Camilla was doing her homework at a rickety table. Jalen was clutching his notebook tightly. "Where were you after school today?" her mother asked without turning her head. "I was at the bus stop," Jalen said. "I was drawing." His mother turned to her son with a tired but loving look. "Dinner is ready. Tell me later." But Jalen didn't, at least not yet, because it was a new journey inside her, too fragile for words, because it was as if life had given him a glimmer of hope for the first time. Maybe he could say, "I exist. I am recognized too." That night, after everyone was asleep, Jalen got out of bed. Without turning on the light, he put his notebook on his knees. He began to draw, thinking of Taylor. But this wasn't just a portrait, it was a picture in his eyes of the invisible strength that Taylor carried. Not only in his music, but in the lines of his face, the hidden weariness in his gaze, but also in his determination. He worked on that drawing for 3 nights. On the morning of the 4th day, he finished the drawing. It was as if Taylor's eyes were merging with the eyes of a child sitting next to her, telling her about herself. She closed the notebook and picked up the card Taylor had given her again. This was more than a dream for her. This was the first time she could describe herself in a meaningful way. But the very next morning, everything was shaken. Jalen heard his mother's muffled voice. She was talking on the phone. The conversation was short. Silence. Then he went into the kitchen and sat on the floor. He put his head in his hands. His eyes were empty. "Mom?" Jalen said, scared. The woman turned her eyes to her son with a wet, empty, shattered expression. "Your father," she said in a choked voice. "It happened at the construction site. The collapse. Jalen, your father is gone." For a moment, the world froze for Jalen. Everything stopped with a scream. Emiliano started crying. Camilla got up from the table and hugged her mother, shaking. Jalen was motionless. For a few seconds, he forgot to breathe. It was as if his heart was trying to get out of his body. At that moment, he gripped the notebook tightly. that drawing. It made even more sense to her now. Somewhere, Taylor's eyes were still looking at her as if to tell her to keep going. That evening, for the first time, he did not draw. But the next morning, in his darkened room, his eyes sleepless until dawn, he opened the notebook again, and he started drawing not only Taylor, but himself. A child crying, screaming, on the verge of rebellion, and then slowly getting up. Because he couldn't go back. The darkness had already descended on him, but he had to go through it. It was his only chance, for himself and his two brothers. Taylor's drawing was now a mission, and this time, it would lead him not just to paper, but to a real encounter. Taylor Swift was looking out the brown window of her small hotel in Chicago. The city seemed lost in shades of gray. The sky and the pavement were the same color. People hurrying past, none of them looking at each other. Silence. But it was a suffocating silence, in a kind of mental noise. Taylor was still thinking about the picture drawn by the boy she met a few days ago. Jalen. He was a boy who spoke with his silence. His portrait reflected Taylor's inner world like a wordless mirror. His gaze reminded her of her own inner reckoning. The drawing in the corner of his desk was now framed. He put it next to him every morning like a cup of coffee. It was more than a drawing. It was a bond. Taylor picked up the phone. He texted his assistant, Emma. "I want to see Jalen again. Please contact him. Go to the neighborhood if necessary." The next morning, Taylor's car slowed at the corner of the neighborhood where Jalen lived. When he looked out the window, everything was familiar, but at the same time completely different. This was a neighborhood to be seen with the heart, not the eyes. Broken mailboxes, cracked walls, but still flowery curtains attached to the windows. The flowers in the windows were like symbols of life, as if to say that no matter how bad life is, life will always exist. With Emma's guidance, Taylor first knocked on the neighbor woman's door. Rosa, 52 years old, wrinkles at the corners of her eyes, but warmth from within. "I'm Jalen's neighbor," Rosa said. "The boy is going through hard times." Taylor cocked his head. "I know. We made a connection with him, but we couldn't keep it going. I want to help, but not by force. By walking in her footsteps." Rosa smiled. "He draws late every night. The light is always on, and she looks after her little brothers. Quiet, but strong. It's not like a child, it's something else." After Taylor left Rosa's house, she didn't go to Jalen's house. Instead, she waited in the car outside his school. During lunch recess, Jalen saw her as he walked out of the school and walked to the corner store. They locked eyes. Jalen stopped for a moment. Then he kept walking. But Taylor got off too. He approached him. "Hi," Taylor said. Jalen bowed his head, took the notebook out of his pocket and held out a page. Taylor opened the page. Her eyes welled up. This time Taylor was crying in her portrait, but there was a strange peace in her face. Underneath it said only this: "Your music began where I was silent." Taylor gripped the page in her hands. "Your drawing started where I couldn't speak." They sat on a bench. Jalen did not speak at first, but then in a hoarse voice he asked, "Why did you come?" "Because I promised you. You drew me. But even I couldn't understand who you were, just a child described in lines. But now I want to hear your words." "My sentences are dark," Jalen said. "I have to draw what's left." Taylor leaned in. "You don't have to come out of that darkness, but there's something inside you, something very few people have. You don't just draw what you see, you feel it, and that's precious." Jalen turned his head. "But I'm nobody." Taylor was silent for a while. "I was like that once. I was just a girl before I got on stage. But someone said to me, 'You have a voice.' And now I say to you, you have eyes, Jalen. And whoever doesn't see the light in those eyes loses a lot." At that moment, Jalen's lips moved slightly. His eyes welled up. But he didn't cry, because at his age, crying was like a luxury. Taylor took a small box out of her bag. When she opened it, there was a graphic tablet inside. "It's yours," he said. "But only if you draw it and continue to set an example for your brothers and sisters." Jalen didn't take the box. "What do you want in return?" Taylor laughed lightly. "Just one thing, At some point in his life, if he can't find another kid's pencil, give him a pencil. Jalen looked into Taylor's eyes for a long moment. Then he lowered his head. "Okay," he said. "I promise." At that moment, there was no fame, no age difference between them. Just a boy and a woman. They became like two souls connected by a line. And on that day, under the gray skies of Chicago, a transformation began very quietly. A morning in Chicago, approaching winter. The crispness of the air, combined with the wind whipping through the streets, seemed to test people's hopes. When Taylor picked up his coffee that morning, his mind was still on Jalen's eyes. Those eyes. They said everything but nothing. The second picture Jalen had drawn was now on the glass table in Taylor's office. This time Taylor was in a pose looking up at the sky. He was holding a brush, not a microphone. Underneath was this text: "Sometimes drawing is louder than singing." Taylor realized that this boy was not only talented, but profound. But there was also a danger. When children with such depth shut down, that darkness can become an eternal silence. Taylor had experienced this in her own life. If it hadn't been for someone noticing, maybe she would have been lost herself. That morning, Taylor sneaked off to Jalen's school. He met his teacher, Mrs. Little. As they walked through the student drawings in a small art room, Liddell nodded. "Everyone is confused about Jalen. He is quiet, withdrawn. But every frame he draws leaves even us teachers speechless. Sometimes children build the world they can't talk about by drawing it." Taylor looked at the drawings hanging on the wall for a while. One of them caught her attention. It wasn't Jalen's, but it was reminiscent of his style. 3 children in a dark room looking toward a single window. Outside the window, the sky is blue. "Are these his brothers?" Taylor asked. Mrs. Liddell nodded. "Yes, Jalen's drawings often revolve around them. It's gotten more intense since they lost their father. Can a child carry not only his own pain, but also the burden of his mother and siblings in a drawing?" "He does." Taylor didn't meet Jalen after school that day. Instead, he went to the small art supply store in the neighborhood. Martin, the owner, a middle-aged man, was excited as soon as he recognized him, but Taylor raised his hand to silence him. "Calm down, I'm only shopping for one person here, the boy you named Jalen." Martin adjusted his glasses. "That boy. If you ask me, he has Picasso's talent, but his soul is fragile. He comes to the shop sometimes, takes a long look at the prices of the brushes, but never asks anything." Taylor grabbed a portable coloring set, 3 sets of pencils and special paper from the shelves. But as she put it all in a box, she wrote a note. "If one day you forget yourself, your drawings will find you, -T." In the following days, Taylor began to quietly support Jalen without directly intervening in his life. Both through Rosa and through his connections with the art teacher at school, he paved the way for Jalen to apply for art scholarships. But Jalen did not accept this change easily. One evening, when Taylor was a guest at Rosa's house, Jalen walked through the door. In his hand was a folded piece of paper. He handed it sternly to Taylor. Taylor opened her eyes and saw a dark picture, her own face scratched with tears. But the hands surrounding her were tearing it apart. "What is this?" Taylor said, her voice shaking. "It's true," Jalen said. "No matter how much you want to help, some people in this world are just watched. No one holds them." Taylor took a deep breath. "You are the protagonist of a story to follow, Jalen, but this darkness, it won't overshadow your talent, no matter how hard he tries." Jalen turned his head. "Every morning, I take my brothers to school first, then I go to work. My mom works 3 jobs. What good is my talent? Can these hands draw our hunger too?" Taylor stood up. He approached silently. "These hands may not make bread, but they feed hearts. It makes people see you. And someone like you can one day make other children see you." Jalen was silent for a while. Then his eyes filled. "Do you think I can be a good person?" Taylor didn't hesitate. "You're already a good person. You just don't have the confidence to see yourself yet." That night, Jalen started drawing again, but this time not just on paper. On the window, on the mirror, on the wall. He tried to color everywhere he saw, because there was someone inside her now, Taylor's voice, and that voice stayed with her like a hope that wouldn't stop. The first snow of winter quietly descended on the streets of Chicago. The whiteness accumulated on the roofs of buildings, creating a fleeting illusion of innocence in the city. But the struggle inside some houses continued to overshadow the beauty on the other side of the glass. Rosa's apartment was now filled with Jalen's drawings. Where there used to be traces of moisture on the walls, now there were colorful portraits, scenes, dreamlike images. Her younger siblings pointed at their older brother's drawings and made up stories. Their favorite drawing was the flying man figure on the windowsill, a man wearing a backpack that looked like an airplane engine, soaring into the sky. The facial features, if you looked carefully, were Jalen's own. But real life was not as bright as dreams. Jalen's mother, Clara, had been more reticent lately. Between 3 jobs, she didn't even have the energy to talk anymore. She had become a zombie. Sometimes in the morning, she would be found asleep on her feet. Sometimes at night, she would be covered with a blanket by her young son as he cried. That evening, Taylor came to visit them again. This time he brought hot food, but Clara was as surprised as Rosa. When Taylor was alone with Clara in the corner of the kitchen, he asked directly, "How long has he been like this, Clara?" Clara smiled tiredly. "When hasn't it been?" "Since I lost my husband. Years have passed, but there's a tiredness that won't go away. It's like a red alarm silently flashing inside a mother." Taylor put his hand on her. "You're standing up straight, but sometimes it's braver to ask for help than to fall." Clara bowed her head. "I had to learn not to ask for help." Taylor swallowed. There was a familiar pain in that sentence. She remembered how many pretenses she herself had once put on to tell people she was fine. Just then, Jalen's voice came from inside. "Excuse me." When Taylor and Clara came into the room, Jalen was showing them a drawing facing them. This time it was a drawing of Taylor shedding tears, but there was a shadow behind it, the silhouette of a tiny child catching Taylor's tears in his hands and putting them in a small glass of water. "That was me," Jalen said. "When you cried, I wanted to turn it into something. A song, a drawing, like you." Taylor's throat tightened. "That's the best metaphor I can come up with," he said quietly. The following week, Taylor took Jalen to the Chicago Art Center. A curator he knew was organizing an exhibition for young talent. But in that crowded building, Jalen kept his hand in his pocket and avoided eye contact, like every time he felt worthless. Taylor leaned down and got eye level with him. "I brought you here because there is room for you here. But the important thing is, can you make room for yourself in your own life?" Jalen didn't answer. He just took a deep breath. The curator came and examined the drawings. He stood in front of one of them and was silent for several minutes. It was one of Jalen's drawings of 3 children waiting by their father's grave. There was no color, but the emotion was stark. She said, taking off her glasses, "This drawing is not just about loss. It's about standing up to life even after loss." Jalen bowed his head. "I have to keep them up." The woman knelt down. "And you do it by drawing. Children like you are the silent architects of the world. You must remember that." That day, Jalen drew outside for the first time. On the window of the art center, he drew the figure of a child with chalk. But this time, the boy was not alone. He was surrounded by people reaching out to him. One of the figures was a woman, her hair disheveled but her eyes full of hope. Taylor. At night on the way home, Taylor asked Jalen, "You know, when did I love you the most?" "When?" said Jalen shyly. "When you don't want to prove anything to me. When you're just being yourself." Jalen leaned his head against the glass. "I'm still fighting that dark room inside me." Taylor touched his shoulder. "But this time, you're not alone in that room." Another child was no longer alone in the streetlight-lit silence of Chicago. The winter months in Chicago are long, but some days, the gray skies unexpectedly yield to the sun. One of those days would be a turning point in Jalen's life. Taylor arrived at Jalen's house early in the morning. When Rosa opened the door, she was holding a yellow invitation card. "To Jalen?" she asked in surprise. Taylor shook his head. "This is his day." That morning, Jalen was preparing for the opening of a small but intimate exhibition of his drawings. A small gallery had been arranged with Taylor's art advisors, local supporters, and a few art lovers. The sign at the entrance read, "If a child is locked in a room and begins to draw in the darkness with a pencil, perhaps the light is not coming from outside, but from within." Taylor wrote that article. Jalen didn't say much in the morning. He had even noticed the wrinkles in the secondhand shirt he was wearing. But what Taylor saw when she looked at him was different. He was no longer someone who spoke in lines, but someone who moved people with his lines. Inside the gallery were drawings depicting Jalen in his darkest hours, a child buried in a pillow, a figure watching the light through a broken window, a man with a taped heart, and towards the end of the gallery, new works shining with hope. A mother cooking with Rosa and her siblings, children laughing in parks, a young man standing and his eyes shining. There was one of the visitors, Mr. Dela Cruz, the neighbor. He was walking slowly with his cane, looking at the drawings one by one, nodding his head slightly in front of each one. "Taylor came to you. You noticed, didn't you?" he asked. The man turned his eyes to Jalen. "I only saw a shadow inside him, but you made a star out of that shadow." Taylor smiled quietly. At the end of the exhibition, when everyone was dispersing, Jalen went to a corner. Taylor came up to him, touched his shoulder. "People were here because they loved you, Jalen. But you loved yourself first." Jalen turned his eyes to the floor. "I still close the door to that room every day, but now there's someone behind it. You." Taylor bowed his head. "Even if one day I'm gone, there's someone else who will be there for you." "Who?" "It's you." Near sunset, as Taylor was about to leave, Jalen pulled a piece of paper out of his pocket, a self-drawn portrait of Taylor. But it was no ordinary drawing. Behind his face were small figures, a boy playing a guitar, a teenager holding back tears, a girl sitting on a collapsed wall. "This is your story," Jalen said. "But the people in it are kids like me." Taylor looked at that drawing. Her eyes welled up. "Are you giving this to me?" "No," Jalen said. "It just needs to be on your wall." Taylor took the picture. He put his hand on his heart. Years passed. Jalen didn't become famous. He never appeared on any television program. She didn't even have a social media account. But every month she put a few drawings in an envelope and sent them to anonymous homeless associations, trauma centers, sick children. His drawings came from the hands of someone who knew the language of pain. He was quietly helping. Rosa grew up. She went to university. So did the other siblings. One morning, Clara was finally able to rest for the first time, with a slight smile on her face and her head resting on her pillow. Mr. Dela Cruz passed away, but Jalen always left flowers at his house. Taylor took one of Jalen's drawings with him on every tour. In some of his songs, he hid a child's scream, whisper, hope between the lyrics. A documentary was made years later. It had no title. But in one scene, Taylor was quietly pointing to a picture. "This," he said, "was drawn by a child without asking for anything. Just to understand." Jalen's name was never mentioned, but its trace is everywhere, like light through tears. And maybe one day a child will again draw something with a pencil in a dark room. Then someone else like Jalen's path will be illuminated. And this will always continue.